Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. Whilst I was away on a short holiday, there were tons of announcements, so I'm playing catch up with these ranking videos. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at NG Models November announcements. It's interesting when I do videos for NG Models, as I'm sure most of you know, they don't really have any weak molds, so it's not often that they score particularly poorly. But there is quite a bit of repetition, and certainly, as I'm sure you guys know if you listen to these videos regularly, I've been a bit disappointed historically in the number of classic releases that are being made. It is interesting, therefore, that NG has said that next year will be the year of classics. They let classic be classic is their slogan, but it's a little unclear whether they or what their definition of classic is. The first couple of announcements are Air China A330s, which I don't think any Western collector would consider to be classic. There aren't many, if any, classic A330s. So that is interesting. It's interesting also to see what they produce each month and how I go about ranking those. And I tend to do it not based on whether I'm going to buy the models, but based on kind of partly that, obviously, but also on how I feel the collector will view these. So, as always, it's a case of, what has been made previously and how these compare to that, but also, how excited will I think collectors be across the board. So I try to balance my personal feelings with the feelings I see around collectors on forums and Facebook and such. So anyway, that's kind of how I go about that. And so even though personally I'm not overly excited by this bunch of NG models, there are still some really good supersonic models in here. It's just they're not ones that fit within my collection criteria often. So it is, anyway, it's an interesting set, but also not an interesting set, if that makes sense. So we'll see that when I go through the individual models. And before I do that, obviously, drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate those likes and subscriptions. Thank you. And check me out at Yesterday Airlines on Instagram and on Facebook, and obviously at the website yesterdaysairlines.com, where there's loads of cool stuff coming up. Just in the last few days, I reviewed the Aero Afrique A310 by Aero Classics, and also wrote about one of the other Aero Classics releases, the Compass Airways A310, in an AF history blog. So as new models come into the collection, I like to give them a look over, review, check them out, and talk sometimes about the history of their service and the airlines they represent. And obviously also plenty of new mold stuff coming up as well. NG are sending me the 767 samples, so we'll be having reviews of those soon too. But okay, let's get into this video. We've got 29 models to go through, so once again, need to keep it quick. And I will see you in the next part. So straight into the 29 models, starting with the Airbuses. And there is a selection of Sichuan Airlines this month, which we will begin with one of. And these are models which NG put out on their website for almost pre-order for one point. So I'm not quite sure if these will be standard releases or you can only get them through that. It's unclear. Anyway, they start with a Sichuan Airlines A319 B6447. It's wearing a very attractive scheme representing the 2021 World University Games, and it's actually a model I already own because NG sent me a version of this a long time ago now, about almost a year ago. So they must have had these hanging around for a while. I haven't released them probably for licensing reasons, I'm guessing. It's a really nice scheme, and it's a model which I really appreciate, and it's very colourful. Nobody else has made it. So I'm going to put this one up into supersonic to start off, though I obviously realise that your average Western collector isn't going to be interested in it. That's the only A319. Next up, we've got some A320 CEOs. Quite a few this month, actually, 6 of them. And we start with a couple of Alaska Airlines. The first up is N642VA. This aircraft is wearing standard Alaska colours with the wingtip fences. And NG has been making quite a few Alaska Airlines A320s in recent times. This or these two will make it 4. So they're making kind of all the combinations, which is great if you're a collector of Alaska Airlines, I guess, and if you want all your A320s to look the same. Because when you look at what's been made previously, there has been a hodgepodge of releases from people like Aeroclassics and geminijets. And it's obviously the Gemini and the Aeroclassics models don't look very much like each other, so they kind of stand out if you had both versions of those. This scheme and wing configuration variant has been made by both of those manufacturers previously, by Aeroclassics and Gemini. In fact, I think it's been made by Aeroclassics twice, looking at things, and their version's very nice, but the NG one will be slightly better, presumably. Because it's been made before, I'm going to put this into just Workhorse, though I get the feeling it will be still pretty popular, along with the next A320, which again is Alaska Airlines, and this one is wearing the Fly with Pride colours, which is quite a nice scheme actually. And the reg is N854VA, and again, once again, this has been made previously. It's been made both by Gemini and Aeroclassics. So again, I'm going to put this one also into Workhorse because it has been made before, and the Aeroclassics ones do look really nice. The Gemini ones look less nice, the mould isn't as good. But I think these will be super nice, and if you've got the previous two NG Alaska A320s, then I can imagine getting the set of all 4 would be pretty nice. Next up, we've got another airline which NG has been pretty interested in recently, and that is Avianca, because they've already released 4 Avianca A320s in various heritage colour schemes, and they've all looked spectacular. And now we've got 2 more, but these ones are in more standard Avianca schemes. The first one up is wearing actually a special scheme, but a special scheme that looks at least like the modern Avianca colours. It's a rainbow, another Pride colour scheme, I think, and it is N724AV. This actually, again, is a really nice livery. It looks super good. I'm really liking it, and you could almost build a collection nowadays of just Pride colour or Pride related models, because there are so many different airlines with Pride related schemes around, and they're always super colourful and look really good. And this one looks really nice. In fact, it looks arguably better than the standard Avianca colours do. So that's a super good model, and nobody else has made it before. Also, alongside that one is another Avianca A320. This one, N745AV, is wearing the standard scheme, and again, it's a nice livery, though nowhere near as colourful as the scheme in the Pride colours. And although they don't look quite as good, I think, as the retro schemes that they've been made for Aerogal and Laxa and Taka and such, they still look really nice. And what is interesting and unusual is that they haven't been made by anyone else, which surprised me a bit. The standard colours Aviation has not been made by anybody else. So that is a little weird. And both of these being colourful and one of them being the standard scheme, I'm going to push these both up into supersonic. They're the sort of models that I kind of wish that I could buy, but they're so far outside of my collection criteria, it would be a bit crazy for me to do so. Now, following on from a Delta A319, which I think was announced last month, we now have a Delta A320 as well. And this one's registered N320 US. And once again, I'm surprised when I look back at what's been made for Delta A320s that there haven't been more. Gemini have made 2, but only a long time ago on the older JC mold, not the one that's around now. In fact, 2016 was the last time they made one, so that's a little unusual. Will there be one out by Gemini next month, like they followed up the NG A319 with one of their own just recently? I don't know, but it still won't be as good as this version. Aeroclassics have also made a version of this, and that looked really nice as well. But in comparison to the Alaskas, I feel that there are less of these available, and they are older releases, whereas the Alaska A320s were released relatively recently, I believe, by Gemini Aeroclassics. So I think that there probably is more of a desire for these models in the marketplace, and I'm actually going to put this one up into supersonic. I'm really surprised there aren't more Delta A320s in the 400 scale than the 3 previous ones, 2 of which are very old. The last A320 is the same as the one that was recently announced by Phoenix. It is Air Canada Jets. It's wearing this all black scheme, CFN Victor Victor. Looks really nice. slightly less exciting because Phoenix have announced it, but obviously the NG version is going to be much superior. I'm going to put this one up into high flyer. It's Airliners is not a full airline. It's it's their sports business, and it has been announced by Phoenix. So that rounds up the A320s, but of course there's almost always A321s nowadays. The type is so popular, and we've got 4 of those to discuss as well. Beginning with an A321neo in the colours of, again, Alaska Airlines, and this one is registered N921 Victor Alpha, so it's another one of those old ex-Virgin America aircraft. And looking at what has been made for A321neos, they have been made both by Air Classics and by geminijets in this standard scheme. But yeah, the Gemini one again, it just doesn't look very good, does it? Because it's got those giant Neo engines on it that I often moan about. And the Air Classics one looks okay, but yeah, it's not really kicking bum the way that their older A320 releases did. I'm going to put this one up into high flyer. I think that there's a reasonably strong demand for it, and I do think that the Gemini version that was released previously is just not very good. In fact, when was that released? That was 2019, so that was 4 years ago that was released. Now, I literally just earlier this week talked about the fact that even though Gemini have announced the first United A321neo, that it's bound to be released by someone else. And I hadn't really checked through the NG releases at the time, but now obviously I am. And I see that, literally as I say, it's bound to get released by somebody else. And it has been released by NG in exactly the same month that Gemini have. And this is illustrative of that issue that I raised in the Gemini video, that the two just incomparable in terms of the quality, certainly for A321neo. So the NG version is clearly going to be vastly superior. I don't know why anyone would buy the Gemini. And this is going to be a stalwart aircraft for United for many years to come. Obviously a really important release for American collectors. Clearly it's supersonic, whereas the Gemini version with that mould clearly isn't supersonic. The next two A321neos are both in the colours of Zhejiang Long Air, which is a Chinese airline that lots of people probably haven't heard of a great deal, though it's got a reasonable number of releases in 400 scale from a variety of manufacturers. Both of these were actually announced again by NG on their website as possible pre-orders, and I have to say that they both look spectacular. The scheme they're in isn't the standard Long Air scheme, which isn't really lovely. Instead, it's a scheme which represents, I think it's the Hangzhou 2022, I think it's some kind of sporting event, I can't remember, some kind of games. It's a really nice scheme, looks really good. And both of the aircraft here, which are registered B329R and B329Q, are wearing the same scheme, so they're effectively they're copies of each other. What is slightly annoying from my perspective as a Chinese airline collector is that these have both been announced by HYJL-wings previously, and I'd actually gone and bought one of those, and they still haven't actually got the model out. So it's quite hard to get HYJL-wings. You literally have to buy them from China. So it's a little annoying that now NG are releasing them as standards. But I'm going to get one of these, the one which I didn't get for HYJL. But they both look really good. Once again, not sure whether they'll be available generally or whether you would have had to pre-order them via the NG website. I'm going to put them both up into supersonic. I really like the scheme, and I think that they fit nicely in my collection anyway. Okay, so that just leaves us with 5 more Airbuses, all of which are wide bodies. We start with a pair of Belugas. We've got both registered FWBXL. One is wearing primer colours, and one is wearing, I think, what was the kind of standard scheme. It's got the whale face on it, but it doesn't have all of the details that some of the later ones have. Yeah, they're nice, but at the same time, they've both been released previously by jcwings, and I can't get that excited about Belugas. I'm going to put both of these in Workhorse. They'll be fine models, but they don't do much for me. And next up is a trio of Sichuan Airlines. Once again, these were pre-orderable on the NG website for 1 point. If you have points, then you pay the full price. So I'm not sure if they're going to be released as standard releases or not, though I'd like to think they would be. The aircraft, again, all look wonderful wearing these special schemes, and these ones have all been made before, though, unlike the A319. First up is B5945, which is an A330. This scheme is really nice. I already own the Phoenix version of this, which is good. I did review it, and it wasn't perfect. If this one's available on the free market, I'm tempted to get it. I didn't get to pre-order it, so that's my mistake maybe. I've got the Phoenix version though, and it's not awful. So I'd really like it. I think the scheme looks good. The model here, that's finished model pictures I'm seeing, look excellent. And I'm going to put this one up into high flyer. The next two aircraft are both A350s, again, both associated with the games. They're both wearing nice schemes. Both of them have been made before. The aircraft here are B304U and B304V. The schemes are subtly different to each other, but they've got pandas, they've got the logos, they've got people writing them. They're very colourful and very nice. And they've both been made by Aviation 400 before. I think they may have been made by JC as well. I can't remember. But these have less of a need. Having said that, they do look really good, and I'm increasingly thinking that the NG A350 is better than the AV400 A350. I don't like some of the changes that they've made to their A350 mould AV400. It doesn't look as good as it used to me. And there's been some worrying QC issues as well coming with their releases. So this one does look really, really nice, but I'm going to put these both into workhorse because they have been made before, and actually I own both of them, and I don't think I will replace my existing AV400 versions with those. So that brings us to model number 16. So we're just over halfway through the video and now moving into Boeing territory. And we start with not the most exciting model in the universe. It is another Shanghai Airlines 777-800. B2168 is the reg. They made a Shanghai Airlines 777-800 just a month or two ago. I got it. It was very nice. I was very pleased to get it because I previously had a couple of quite poor versions by Phoenix and Witty. So I was very pleased to get that one as a replacement, but I'm not sure we need another one, and it's going to go into workhorse. The next model is also Shanghai Airlines 777-800, B5132. This one, however, is in a special scheme. It's called Jian, or I'm not sure what it represents, to be honest. I haven't looked it up. The scheme looks, it's got some flowers. It looks quite pretty. And I'll definitely be getting it because I'm obviously a Chinese collector. I do like Chinese special schemes. So I'm going to put this one up into high flyer, though. I can imagine that lots of you listening to this video don't agree on that one. Next up is a model which should probably be one of my most exciting, 747 SP, so I should be excited about it, but I'm not really. It's a Qantas SP, it's VH-EAB. It's wearing the 80s, 90s scheme. The difference here is that it's got the small Australian airline titles underneath the Qantas, whereas the previous versions did not. They had different titles. The titles well, I don't look at the model, but is it Spirit of Australia? I can't remember quite what they say. But regardless, the titles are slightly different under the large Qantas. So you'd have to be a pretty strong Qantas collector to even notice this. It is a very small difference. And yeah, I'm not going to be getting that. There's only so many models that look almost the same that you can get, and even though I do collect Qantas, I don't collect every single Qantas aeroplane that comes out. So yeah, I'm going to put this one in workhorse. It's really a very, very minor variation on the existing pair of Qantas 747 SPs that they made in this scheme. So not jumping out at me. And I do have I've got 4 other Qantas 747 SPs, so I've got most of the previous releases, but not going to get this one. So no, I'm just going to workhorse that one. So not a great start for the Boeings, but a much better start for the 757s, and it's nice to say that because I haven't seen a lot of 75s from NG in recent times, and even though these two are relatively modern, they're both quite, I should stop saying interesting, I say it too much, but they are quite diverse, and it's a better choice of airline because it's not one we've seen before, and sometimes these NG sets do look very same with lots of Alaska and Southwest and Shanghai and United and Sichuan and such. So it's good to see something different. This one, or these two, are both in the colours of Aerogal, a Galapagos airline that technically still exists but is now trading as one of the Avianca subsidiaries. I think it's Avianca Ecuador. But they had two 757s for a while in, I think from about 2008 to 2012 or something like that. And they used them to fly to Miami mainly. One of the aircraft had winglets, and that is HCCIY. The other one does not. That was HCCHC. Really liking these two. Really liking them. Love the scheme with the marine iguanas and the frigate birds. And great to have some more diversity. So definitely going to be getting one of these. Of course, being more of a classic guy, I'm going to get the one without winglets. 757s with winglets seems way too modern. So I'll probably get the one without the winglets. I'm going to put both of these up into supersonic though. Really nice to see some 757s and some colourful 757s too. So good choices there. But they probably are the highlight of all the Boeings. And I have to say that even though the Airbuses did quite well in this video and scored quite highly, and I could see the value for quite a lot of those, for the Boeings here I'm not seeing the same value at all. And the next models I find all a bit repetitive and boring. So what are they? Well, we've got a pair of Turkish Airlines 777-300 ERs, TCJ-JA and JJC. I think they've both got exactly the same scheme as each other. Nothing special here. The difference here is that they've got the version of livery, the older version of livery, where you've got the bird logo fitting entirely on the tail, and you've got Turkish in blue and just Airlines in very light colour underneath. Whereas the previous versions they've made have been the more modern version, Turkish Airlines, full titles across the top with the much bigger tail logo. Now, this isn't the first time that anyone's made this scheme variant, the older scheme variant. It was made admittedly quite a long time ago by both Phoenix, in fact maybe just by Phoenix actually. I think they made it quite a few times, and that was as long ago as 2010, so quite a long time ago. So there's perhaps a niche for these, but again, this is going to be the third and fourth Turkish 777 wearing standard colours, and they made a special scheme version as well, and it's like, it's enough of those. I'm going to put these in the workhorse. They're not doing it for me. And even worse are the next three, which are all Zip Air 787s. I've previously had a bit of a whinge about Zip Air being such a boring airline. And NG have made two versions of Zip Air 787As previously wearing the current colours. Now we get two versions wearing the initial colours, which had the Z on the tail, which has gone well out of fashion thanks to the Russians. And they've also got the intermediate scheme, which had like a zippery kind of effect on the tail. Really don't like it. I don't like the graduated kind of cheat line either that Zip Air uses. It's a bit like what Air France tried in, I think it was the early 90s. It just looks kind of weird to have a cheat line that kind of doesn't go the whole length of the aeroplane and is so thin, just as thin as the windows and not wide. It just doesn't look right. Don't like it. Don't like the airline. Putting all these in the workhorse. And they have been made before as well, let's be honest. JC and Phoenix have both been here previously, so not a lot to see there in terms of their uniqueness. All of those are pretty boring, to be honest, so not great. And that then leads us on to just three more models, all of which are 787s, the first of which is a fantasy release. Love it or hate it, NG do like the old fantasy release. So this first one is a Japanese registered JA01 Lima Lima, and it's a Live 787-8, and the scheme is the scheme is pink with hearts and dancing girls on it. And I believe this is based on some form of anime, and it even appears perhaps in the background of that. And I don't watch anime, but I'm vaguely familiar with this. Somewhere I've seen it before. It's but ugly. I can imagine there's a market for it in Asia. They love this kind of twee awfulness, and I find a lot of anime to be just shockingly bad. But yeah, it's not doing it for me. I don't mind the old fantasy model, but this one's rubbish, and I'm going to put this one into Gas Guzzler. Sorry for any anime fans out there. Just not doing it for me. Much like the Pokemon stuff doesn't. It just really kind of twee and naff. And then we finish off with a bit of a slog to the end, because the next two models aren't very exciting either. We've got GCKOF, a North Atlantic 787-9. It's not the first time. Even NG have made a North Atlantic 787-9, though they've not made a G-registered one before. But other than that, I don't think there's anything different about it. Workhorse. And then the last model is the Mission Impossible Etihad 787-9 A6BLO. This has been pre-announced by NG quite a long time ago, I think pretty much when the movie came out. It's also been announced by JC, though their version obviously is not out. So, yeah, it's not the most exciting special scheme. Doesn't really do much for me. I'm going to put this one in Workhorse as well, just not really thrilling me, I have to say. So we got there, and when I look through this list of models, personally, there's not a lot jumping out at me as a collector of, the quite wide range of aircraft that I collect. I'm going to get one of those Shanghai 737s, the one with special scheme. I'm definitely going to get one of the Aerogal 75s. Probably shouldn't though, it's a bit too modern, but I like the look of that. I don't really think I'll be buying anything else unless I'm tempted by more of the Sichuans that I already own a copy of from other manufacturers. But if you're American, I can imagine that there's definitely some interest with the Deltas and the Uniteds and the Alaskas potentially. And if you are collecting Central American or South American airliners, then those Avianca A320s are surely going to be pretty popular. So there is stuff of interest here, not really for me, but there's a lot of pretty tedious stuff, and I have to say that I can't wait for the let classic be classic era to begin, because this release set is not very good in terms of the diversity and the interest level, and even the variants of some of these models, very similar, like the two Turkish 777s, two Zip Air 78s of the same scheme, and reheats of the Shanghai 737 and so on and so forth, and the Qantas SP. Not particularly thrilling, I have to say, but hey, it is a set with some diversity, but not great. And I do hope, and it kind of feels, that NG are trying to get out these models so they can get to their classic space and hopefully revitalise their release sets, which have become a bit staid in the past 4 or 5 months, I think. Anyway, that is it for this month's NG announcements. If you haven't, then check out NG, because they are opening up their CRP program again, and I think from around 8 o'clock tonight on the 9th of November, which is when I'm recording this. So there will be the opportunity for you to reclaim points for free models again. I'm not sure how retailers are finding that scheme, I have to say. I think it's been a bit of a struggle for them. But from our perspective, it's great. And if you can find a reliable retailer to work with, then getting some free models is great. And I got 3 or 4 from the last time they opened it up, the Exchange Mall. It worked fine for me, but I was using Bedfordshire Diecast, who are a very reliable supplier. But I know that it did put some cost on them, and they're going to probably have to try and recreate that this time round. Anyway, all that out of the way, there's a lot going on with NG. Clearly, they are producing high-quality models, not necessarily the diversity I'd like, but hopefully moving in the right direction with this Let Classic Be Classic. Got lots of samples coming, and they're doing the CLP. So they're doing loads of cool stuff, and it's hard to be too harsh on them when I don't like a few of their releases when they're doing so much good work. Now, next up should be the Phoenix video. I'm not sure quite when I'm going to get to that, but hopefully I will in the coming week or so. But that's it from me for now. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.